Kabod Half, how are
How are
you?
you? Nice to see you.
Baruch Hashem.
Hello, hello.
Good evening. Okay, we'll pray for the internet tonight. Hopefully it'll go.
Please, Hashem.
Good evening, good evening. Okay. So I'll just say my little prayer. יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותי שלא יהיה דבר תקל על ידי ולא יחשב בדבר אחד וישמחו בי חבריי שאומר תמות טהור ואל טהור טמא ואל מותר אסור ואל אסור מותר ולא יכשלו חבריי ודבר לך ואשמח בהם כי אדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה גל עיניי ואהבית נפלאות מתורתך. Okay, so we're starting with the Rambam. It says here והרמב"ם כתב תפילין כל זמן שמניחים בברך עליהם. It says the Rambam, all the while that you're putting tefillin, you bless on them. So he says, even if you take it off and put it back on several times, in the day, but he didn't say that every time you grope it, you have to bless on it. That's already a little bit far-fetched. So it seems like he goes like the Ri is one of the Tosfot. Rabbi Yitzchak, it says the Rosh, he says that the only time you bless when the tefillin is on your arm is when it slipped out of its place, right? If it slips out, then you do bless, as we already saw in the Shulchan Aruch in the past, in the Beit Yosef as well. So what you do is once it slips out of the place, you have to put it back and grope it, whatever, and then bless on it. You gotta bless. So what I want to say that it's important to know here that what's the place of the tefillin, right? We've already discussed this a couple of times in my classes, but the proper place for the tefillin of the arm is on the bicep. On the left arm of the bicep, on the lower half of the bicep. That's where it has to be. The tefillin. So if it slips out of that area, you need to bless again. This is what we're saying. The upper half of the bicep is not a kosher for tefillin, according to the Shulchan Aruch. There is an opinion that says it's kosher. The Gra says like that, but we paskin that it's not. Okay, so that's the story. So he says this, we didn't have to write this. Since it came out of its place, when he returns it, this is like you're putting it, brand new, like you're doing a new placement. So it says also it's the same as just when you put tefillin, you have to bless who. According According to this, he says, when it says in the Gemara that these rabbis, when they would grope the tefillin, they would bless mebarche. It's not coming to tell you that you have to bless when you grope it, just regularly to grope it. Right? So he's telling you, right, that it's only said regarding when it fell out of its place. Then you have to bless again, as we said. It's because it's considered to be like a new placement. You placed it new. So it only needs to teach you here the Rabbanan, the rabbis, these rabbis of the Talmud, they hold also like Rabbi Danasi. When he places the tefillin, when he puts the tefillin on, he has to bless on it. And if you're going to tell me Shehu mefaresh keperush Rashi, he wants to explain like Rashi that Tosfot and Tosfot dechol emat the mashma shebehu, that every time you grope it, afilu lo nishmetu min koman, even if it didn't fall out of its place, mevarachei alai, you have to bless on it. Tzarich lomar shehu mefaresh shayu mevarachim lishmor chukav. So it has to be that the blessing they would make would be this blessing, right? Which is, you would say like this, right? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmor chukav. Nobody makes this blessing today, but this would be the blessing theoretically if this was the halacha, which is what? That every time you grope it, you have to bless on it, even though it didn't fall out of its place. So can you imagine there's an opinion like this in the Talmud, or Rashi says, Tosfot also, they hold like this, that every time you grope your tefillin, you have to bless on it. Can you imagine? That could be like you're going to bless 100 times a day.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's the proper kavanah to have, for men obviously, when they grope the tefillin in the arm, and what should they think about? Can they think about the blessing or?
Okay, so the rule is like this, that when you make a blessing in general, you have to at least like concentrate on the words that you're saying.
Okay.
At least that much,
Okay, thank you. Okay, but
yeah, that's important, Like don't make a blessing with a blank head, like blank out. Not a good idea to do that. You should always be like, thinking about what you're saying.
And when you grope the tefillin, what do you think about in order to keep the kavanah?
Well, you're thinking about the blessing, which is what? That Hashem commanded us to guard His laws.
Oh, okay.
That's what it says, So that's what you're thinking about.
Okay. Thank you.
So why are you making this blessing, right? By the way, we don't do it today, obviously. We don't do it today. But why are you making this blessing? The reason is because every time you grope it, it's a mitzvah. Because it says, right, in the Shulchan Aruch, that every time when you're wearing tefillin, you have to grope it constantly.
Okay,
what's the reason you got to grope it? Because you shouldn't forget that you have tefillin on. Okay. Because you have to guard yourself from all kinds of bad thoughts and all kinds of bad things, right? You can't do certain things, right, with your body when you're wearing tefillin.
Okay, so groping it is symbolizing that it's a remembrance to keep.
You're remembering the mitzvah, so therefore you shouldn't do things that you're not allowed to do with tefillin.
Correct.
The whole idea. Yeah, so this is really halakha, Regarding the groping, it is the halakha. Regarding the blessing, it's not the halakha.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
God bless. So now, right, as you said, so since he holds that when you take off the tefillin, that we don't bless when you take it off. By the way, there's also an opinion like that. You have to bless also when you take off the tefillin. We don't do that either, right? That's not the halakha. So we have all kinds of interesting opinions here, right? Groping, taking it off, all kinds of stuff. Right? Since he holds that we don't bless on that, to guard his laws. So therefore, we don't bless them also, he says, when you grope it. According to this, therefore he left out this halakha. He didn't mention it because we don't do it. So it's after I wrote all this, he says, I found the Ran. Right, who's the Ran? Rabbeinu Nissim, right? From Geronda. He was a Spanish guy, Spanish rabbi. Geronda. Shekatav Perek Lulav, right? He writes in this Perek in the Gemara, Arava, Chaf Bet Amud Aleph, Vezel Leshono. He says, all the while that you grope the tefillin, mevaracheh, because you have to bless. That, so he holds like Rashi and Tosfot, the man. Katvu Tosfot says in Tosfot, v'lo yitparash ma'im mevarech. So the Ran says, right, interesting, even though it says you have to bless, but it doesn't say what the blessing is. The lo mistaber shayu mevarchin le'aniach. So it says it doesn't really make sense to say that they were blessing le'aniach tefillin, like when you put it on the first time. Why? Because you're not putting it on, right? So why would you want to bless that? You know, it's already on you. So there's no logic to that, right? Like they were doing before placing it. So it's because they're already standing there right on your arm, right? So what's there to bless on that? So it says the mistabra, the mvarchin lishmor chukav. Oh, he also says this, right? It makes sense to say the blessing is lishmor chukav, to guard his laws, to guard his statutes. Like they do in the West, he says, right? The West. Right? What does that mean, the West? It's talking about usually like Eretz Israel is called the West, even though we call it the Middle East. But for them, it was called the West because they lived in where? They lived in Babel. They lived in Iraq. These rabbis, from the Talmud. So for them, Eretz Israel was the West, right? Or the Wild West, whatever you want to call it, right? One or the other. So okay. So just like they do over there. So it says they do that in the West. They do that when they take off their tefillin. But lo yadati mahu. So he says, I don't know what this is. Deha mefarish b'Yushalmi. It says in Yerushalmi, Gemara Yerushalmi, deate keman de'amar, that it goes according to one who says bechukat tefillin kakatuv medaber, right? That it's talking about the laws of tefillin when it says this to the verse. Klomar the laila lav zman tefillin, right? It means to say that night is not the time of tefillin. The kara in the pasuk, right? In Shemot Yud Gimel Amudal, pasuk Yud. This is what it means to say. You have to guard this law, right? The chukah. You have to guard the statue, right? All throughout the days, right? Now in modern Hebrew, by the way, the word chukah means constitution. Interesting play on the words, but anyway, that's a different story. So it says, they should only be on you in the daytime. It says, therefore, it's pertinent to say, his statues, but it says at the time that they're groping it, how can you say such a thing like that? Like that. So it seems to be, so he says, no, you know what it is? They probably were blessing to guard the tefillin, because you're guarding the tefillin by groping it. So what does that mean? You're guarding its sanctity by not defiling it, since you remember that you have it on. Right? Okay. Right? You have to guard yourself from diverting your thoughts into other things, right? Which is not allowed when you're wearing tefillin. To have like all kinds of bad thoughts, dirty thoughts, all kinds of things like this, right? You're not allowed to have things like this. You have to keep your holiness. Okay, things like this. Says, I don't know why they left it out. Poskim, he says, I don't know why they left it out. They had the Rabbanan that it says the Rabbi said, the Rabbi Asher, the rabbis of the school of Rabbi Asher, it's possible that they held betoch kama shi'ur shel zaman, that within a certain time frame, Adam chayav lemashmesh b'hem, you have to grope it, right? As we said, right? Aval anan de lo kaim kimlan, but it says we don't hold like this. Im levarech kol sha'a shemashmesh b'hem, so therefore it says if we bless every time we grope it, efshar shelemashmesh shelo b'shat chiyuv, it's possible that what we're going to do is we're going to grope it when it's not necessary. Then it's going to be a blessing in vain. Interesting. Says there are those who explain that all the while that they grope it, when they're going out of their place, as we already mentioned, right? This is one of the opinions. That every time it falls out of the place, you do have to bless on it, and that we do paskin like that. That is the halacha. So when you bring them back to Mkomam to his place, ad kanashono, that's the end of the Ran. So he says, nevertheless, any yodea lama katav sheishmitu aposkei halachot. So he says, I don't know why he says that the poskim left it out, this halacha, right? Sharif ve'arosh. So it says the Rif and the Rosh, even though they didn't write it, and that perk over there in Sukkah, but they did write in the laws of Tefillin. So they didn't really leave it out altogether. They just left it out of that place and they placed it somewhere else. Right? So it says Rabbeinu Siman Chet, who's Rabbeinu? The Tur. Right? There is to say, that which we say, that every time you grope it, you have to bless. He also says, right, that's only if it moved out of its place. And he didn't know that they moved out of their place. He didn't realize. But if he himself moved it out of its place, in order to return it immediately, you don't have to bless in a case like that. Because that's not really an interruption, right? Because you had in mind to put it back. But when it falls out of place without you thinking about it, there it's an interruption because you lost track of it. You weren't thinking. So that's the end of that piece there. So it says, implies from his words, Sham that if you do remove them in order to bring them back right away, for instance, let's say he took off his tefillin to go to the bathroom, right? So what does that mean? When he comes out, he'll put it back right back on, right? That's what he'll do.
But no prayer, correct?
I'm sorry.
But no prayer.
Right. Well, it's not really a prayer; it's a blessing, right? You mean the blessing, right? So yeah. So according to this opinion, it seems like you would not bless, right? But the truth is, according to Shulchan Aruch, you do have to bless in a case like that. Okay, we'll see that, B'ezrat Hashem. But there's different opinions going on here. So it says, "Nami sover de'eno tzarich lavarech ukvar katabti sham." Says I already wrote over there. She'en hadavar ken. So it says not so. There you go. Right? Doesn't agree with it, as I told you. You do have to bless. What does that mean? When you go to the bathroom, you do have to bless. Like it says in this parak of Sukkah, Men Bava Amud Aleph. Be'uvda de Rabba, right, in the story of Rabbi over there, Umashma, so it implies over there in the Gemara that when they fell out of their place, right, Dinan Shaver le'asiram mamash, that you do have to, right, return them back. So it says because all the while that you're groping it, if it's going out of its place, you do have to bless on them. As if like they were totally removed. Okay, so it says Katub be'tshuvot Ma'arik Kalag. Okay, interesting. It's written in this the tshuva of this rabbi, Ma'arik Kalag. So he says, Od bikashticha leodienu datcha harchava. So they also wanted you to answer this question, right? Opine your opinion here. Binyan mishem maniach tefillah shel yad, regarding somebody who puts the tefillin of the arm, uberech aleh, and he blessed on it, be'od shehu mehadik hartzvot, while he's tightening the straps, al zero'o, on his arm. Right? In the beginning of the tightening, nifsaka kesher. So what happened was that at that point, the knot got broken, whatever, right? Something got broken there. The shel yad of the hand. So what does that mean? The knot that holds the hand tefillin, the arm tefillin, on your arm broke. It snapped. So now you have to make a new one, right? You got to redo it. Omnam, so he says, however, lo yisiach da'ato, he didn't divert his attention though. Ve'asa kesher achar ha'em, so then he made a different knot. So then would he have to come back and bless on the arm again? Because you just made a new knot. So when you blessed, you weren't thinking about this knot, you were thinking about the original knot. This is the reason why he's asking this question. וחזר והניח תפילין של יד, then he put the tefillin in the hand, or לא, or not. עד כאן השאלה. This is the end of that תשובה. ותשובה לא נכתבה שם. Look what it says, right? The question was asked, but the answer was not written there. ונראה שאם היה נפסק אחר הידוק וקשירה, so it says Maran, Bit Yosef, that he says it seems like that what? That if it broke, that knot, after you tightened it and tied it, אפילו פעם אחת, even one time, al hazroa, on the arm, v'yaksitzah, and lo hava mibaya le, you wouldn't even ask this question. Shemima shkatabti besamuch, because whatever we wrote close by here, כשחולץ תפילין, that you have to, when you take off the tefillin, al dat lachazor necham, in order to put them back again immediately, miyad. Tzarich lachazor v'alech, you do have to bless. You do have to bless, right? According to Shulchan Aruch. Haba mipshita de'afal gav de'lo asach da'at teminayu. So he would have answered that even though he didn't divert his attention from it, tzarich lachazor v'alech, you do have to come back and bless. Ve'efshar de'afilu beiduk lechudeh haba mipshita le. So it says it's possible that even just by tightening it, it would have been simple to him. He wouldn't even ask this question. Did you have to bless again? So tzarich lachazor v'alech. But it says just by tightening it, without tightening it at all, because you already did the mitzvah of putting the tefillin. It's already done. So therefore, when he now places them again, you do have to bless again. So he says the only question there is really like this: that because it broke in the beginning, when he was tightening it, it's still not considered to be at this point placing it. You didn't get to the point that you placed it in a kosher way. You didn't get to that yet. The bracha so comes out that the blessing that he blessed in the beginning, it didn't really take effect on any mitzvah. Why? Because the mitzvah wasn't done. Right? It broke before he was able to do it. That's what it means to say. So he says, since he didn't divert his attention from it, so therefore you do have to now. I'm sorry, the blessing does go on the second one, since he didn't finish the first one at all. So therefore, you don't need a second blessing. That's what he's trying to say. So he says that's the way it seems more probable. Since it didn't interrupt here something which is not related to the tefillin, so therefore the blessing took effect, and therefore you don't need another one. So afterwards I found written in the Orchot Chaim, right? These are all Rishonim, these Chachamim here, right? The early authorities. Katab Rabad, says the Rabad, the Tshuva, and also in a response, Shem Hutar Shel Yad Kodem Hanachat Tefillin, that if the arm tefillin was opened up, in other words, the knot opened, it wasn't tight, right? Before Hanachat Tefillin Shalosh, before you put the tefillin of the head, me'adek, you should tighten it. Then tzarich lachazor, you don't have to bless again, right? Because it came off, the knot loosened. But if you put first the head tefillin, and then the hand tefillin was opened, then you would have to bless again and tighten it. Why is that? Because he already finished the mitzvah. By doing the head, he already finished it. So therefore, now he needs another blessing. Very interesting. Okay, so then he says, Katuv be'orchot chaim. It says in Orchot Chaim, B'Shem ha'itur, the name of the itur, shemutar levarech al tefillin she'olim. Oh, so he says that if you borrow tefillin from somebody, you do have to bless on it. This comes in contrast to what we said about tzitzit, right? That if you borrow the tzitzit, you don't bless. We talked about that before in the laws of tzitzit. So here, you do have to bless, he says. But if you stole it, right, you don't bless. If you stole it, tefillin. The Botzea Berech Nats Hashem, right? So this verse is coming and saying like this, right? If you do a sin and steal, and then you bless, you like this, you're you're disgracing God by doing that. It's a disgrace. It's blasphemy, right? Whatever you want to call it, right? Ad shehe bahem yush. Until what? Until the point where the owner gives up hope. And also it's transferred to a different location. So that's the whole thing, right? This is a very important concept in halakha that everybody has to know, which is that if something is stolen, right? When does the owner lose possession of the item that's halakhically considered to be not his? Right. So the answer is amongst several other answers as well, but standard answers like this, right? If the owner gave up hope from retrieving that item, number one. Number two, also that it was moved from one place to another. It was physically moved around, whatever, to a different place. That already relinquishes the ownership of the owner, and therefore now it's owned by the person who stole it, right? So he owns it now. Okay, good. So that's the end of the Bet Yosef. We're going to do Shulchan Aruch. Very good.
Kavod Harab, I have a question.
Sure.
So if the person stole the tefillin, right, or the item, and then
I'm sorry,
blesses
again, I
them.
didn't hear that. What was that again?
So if the person steals the tefillin, right?
He stole the what? I'm sorry?
The tefillin, if
Okay.
he steals it, and then he, of course, blessing on it will be blaspheming Hashem. So what happens with the mitzvah of tefillin in his state? It's not fulfilled?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the truth is, he probably does fulfill the obligation when it's stolen. In other words, you shouldn't bless on it, but you did fulfill the obligation.
Okay, thank you.
Where do I know that from? Because we already learned something similar to that, which is that a person can borrow tefillin without permission to put it on. He doesn't need the permission of the owner. Why is that? Because we assume the owner wants him to do the mitzvah. He doesn't mind. So you see from there that by taking the tefillin without permission, you do fulfill your obligation like that. Of course, this is different because here he intended to steal it, right? That's something else. But nevertheless, it seems like he does fulfill his obligation because he only says you shouldn't bless, right? He doesn't say you didn't fulfill your obligation. So it implies that he did fulfill his obligation.
Thank you.
It's a little bit of a question mark still there, not 100% sure, but it seems reasonable like that, Okay, so all right, so so it says, 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. No, this is not the place. Oh. I have to bring up the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so we have here. Do you remember which number we were on here?
Let me check.
Not this one.
Mm. No, I don't have that.
Okay, I'll find it, don't worry.
I'm sorry.
No problem. I'm getting close, getting warm. We're almost there. I had to bring back the Bet Yosef because they're out of order. That's why. So we just did the last one. We just did Yud Bet. Interesting. That was Yud Bet. Okay. Okay, so sorry for the delay, but here it is, right? It goes if he puts tefillin several times a day, you have to bless every time. If they moved out of their place, and now you grope them to put them back into their place, you do have to bless, as we said. So, two things, right? We learned here. One is you have to bless every time you put it on. Two, if it falls out of its place and you're returning it to its place, also there you got to bless as well. So then it says the Rama, so he says if you're just returning one of them to its place, you do have to bless on that as well, just like you're putting like one tefillin. Yeah, so that would mean, right? He's trying to tell you that even if the head one comes out of its place, you have to bless on that too. Even though the Sfarim don't usually bless on the one on the head, but now that it came out of its place, you would have to bless. So what would a Sephardi guy bless on that if the head one came out? He would bless lehaniach tefillin, just like he does for the arm. But the Ashkenazi would have to make two blessings here, like lehaniach and also al mitzvah tefillin. Just letting you know, right? Pleasant reminder. Okay, so then it goes on to say, what about if he moved it out of its place in order to return it right away? So he says, there you have to bless as well, right? And here, right, the Ramah says, so the Ramah argues with this. So therefore, the Ashkenazim, they don't bless in a case like this. What does that mean? They don't bless in a case where you removed it in order to put it back right away. The truth is, if I'm not mistaken, most of the Achronim agree with the Ramah here. So therefore, most people probably don't bless in this case. Even though Maran says to bless, most people probably don't bless.
Rabbi, what if most of the time the head tefillin just moves out of the place and you don't know about it, and somebody tells
for sure you have to bless.
Uh-huh.
No, we already spoke about that several times. So yeah, that's the story.
Interesting. I never saw anybody actually bless. What?
Yeah, because honestly, a lot of people don't know the halachot, these halachot. Most people don't know these halachot.
Got it.
Lost
Thank you,
the
Rabbi.
screen here. I don't know what happened. How did we just lose the screen? Okay, do you see the screen, guys?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So, okay. All right. So, and he goes on to say, Misha, let's see. I'm sorry, before we move on, I would just like to see here the Mishnah Berurah, what he says here about this particular case that we just spoke about, where he had an intention to return it right away. Right, so you know what Mishnah Berurah says? He says, as we said, right, the Achronim seem to agree with the Ramah here. So therefore, a lot of people won't bless on this. Probably most people will not in this case. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the case where you had intention to return it right away. That's one thing, right? And then he also says something interesting, that let's say your intention was not to return it right away, to return it after a while. So then he says, for sure, you have to, according to everybody, you have to bless. You do have to bless, even though you put it on right away, because your intention was not like that. That's what he says. So that makes sense. I mean, probably most people do like the Mishnah Berurah here, even though I'm not one of them, right? I always go like Maran with these things, so therefore I would bless, if that was the case. Okay, so that's the story. I go with Maran. Okay, so that's the story with that. Let's go to the next one, which is Yud Gimel, probably. Also, I did want to mention, to sum up a little bit, add a little bit to what we talked about the other day, which was, that if you remember, Yitzchak, that we talked about the issue when there's a machloket between the Zohar and Talmud, right? We go like the Talmud, right? So we Maran paskin like this in the Bet Yosef. So what was the reasoning there? The reasoning was like this, right? That he said that even though Rabbi Shimon, who's a Tana, says, one thing, and the Emoraim in the Talmud, who were after the Tanaim, they're not really allowed to argue with the Tanaim. They concluded it differently, right? So the thing is that says Maran, never, even though Rabbi Shimon was a Tana, but since his opinion is mentioned in the Zohar HaKadosh and in the Talmud, they didn't paskin like that. So says Maran with Yosef that we don't paskin like that, nevertheless, even though it's a Tana, because the rabbis of the Talmud considered that but rejected it. And we go according to the conclusion of the Talmud, right? That's what he says. But there's something similar to that, which I want to point out to you, which is a little similar, but not exactly the same. Which is, what about if the Rishonim, right? Not the Talmud. The Rishonim had a certain opinion in halacha. Now, as we already mentioned in Beit Yosef, right? The Rishonim didn't see the Zohar. They never saw that book. Okay, so now what about us? We did see the Zohar. So the question is, what should we do now if there's a machloket between the Zohar, which is a Tana, right? Tana, Rabbi Shimon, whatever. Machloket between Rabbi Shimon the Tana and the Rishonim, because they didn't see the Zohar. So how do we paskin in a case like that? The Rishonim say one thing, and the Zohar, the Tana of the Zohar says something else.
Rabbi, don't the Rishonim rely on the Talmud?
Right, that's exactly the point. But here's the thing, right? That in the Talmud, it's not written explicitly, this halacha. You know what I mean? So they learned it like as an inference, They inferred from the Talmud like that. But it doesn't say explicitly that halacha. So they use their noodles, you know what I mean? They use their brains to deduce this halacha. Okay? But in the Zohar, it says just the opposite. It comes Rabbi Shimon or whatever, one of those Tanaim in the Zohar, and says just the opposite of that. So how do we pass in a case like that? So there's one rule here, right? Which is that how can the Rishonim argue with the Tana? You know what I mean? That's the thing. So the truth is that in a case like that, there is more of a lenient, more of a inclination to say we should go like the Zohar. Because if the Rishonim would have seen that one of the Tanaim said not like them, they certainly wouldn't have argued with that. It's an interesting question, this it's not so clear cut like the one that we discussed with the Emoraim. Not exactly the same thing.
Are you referring to like the washing of the hands that we discussed before in the beginning? That according to the Zohar, you have to use the kli, right? And Maran Bet Yosef brings down the Zohar and argues with the other opinions.
What I'm talking about is that something where the Rishonim paskin one way, they didn't see the Zohar, and the Zohar says something else altogether. So what do you do over there? Do we go like the Rishonim or the Tanaim of the Zohar? I mean, this question comes up, by the way, sometimes. My inclination is to say that you have to look at each case by its own merits. You know what I mean? Right. You can't really make a general rule out of this. Really, there's so much. You have to see like where the logic of the whole thing, how they got the halacha, how they deduced it, how close is it to the Talmud, all kinds of things, all kinds of issues there. It's an interesting question. Okay, I just wanted to bring that up, but it's not exactly the same as what we discussed before. Okay, why is that? Because he's relying on the fact that the rabbis of the Talmud knew what Rabbi Shimon said, but nevertheless they rejected it. That's one thing, but these Rishonim who never saw the Zohar, that's already something else. If they would have seen it, they probably wouldn't have argued.
Right. Rabbi, where would they see Rabbi Shimon's opinion if it's not in the Talmud itself?
I'm sorry?
Where would they see Rabbi Shimon's opinion?
Well, Rabbi Shimon wasn't learning from the Talmud. He was learning from the Sefer Torah. The Tanaim, you understand?
Yeah.
They don't need the Talmud. They are the Talmud.
No, but everyone's opinion was recorded.
I'm sorry?
But if everyone's opinion was eventually recorded in the Talmud, why wasn't Rabbi Shimon's opinion there as well?
Yeah, well, as we said, right, there's two different possibilities. Okay, that's an interesting question, by the way, what you're asking. So you know what it is, right? The answer is like this. Who wrote the Mishnayot?
Rabbi Yehuda?
Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? Okay, he wrote the Mishnayot. So he included. Did he include everything that the Tanaim said? No. He only included the things which he thought they were the halacha. Pretty much, or like a machloket there, something, whatever. Understand? That's what he included. And who wrote the Braitot? It was Rabbi Chia, who was the good friends with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. They were in the same generation, so they're the ones who wrote down these teachings. You know what I mean? So now it could be that there was other teachings, around from the Tanaim. They didn't include it in there for some reason or other. Either they didn't know about it. It could be possible, or they knew but they didn't think it was authoritative. Whatever it is, we don't really have a clear tradition about that. Why they excluded it? Whatever they excluded, we don't know. So it's an interesting thing, right? So that's the way it goes, So what they say, right? Rabbi Akiva, right, as an example, right? How did the Tanaim paskin halacha? They paskin from the Chumash. They darshan the Chumash. They extrapolated the Chumash itself. That's how they did it. Of course, most of it was like tradition, They had a masoret, they had a tradition. There was a tradition there. It wasn't just like they but they say, right, Rabbi Akiva was so smart that he was able to take the crowns of the Torah, and learn halachot from there, Can you imagine learning halachot from the crowns of the Torah?
Rabbi, so that's a very interesting question. Did they derive, or did they actually build support from deriving from the Torah, or
all kinds of
what
things.
they
There
already
was
knew by
both.
tradition?
There was both, But can you imagine this is the level that they were on? These people, you understand? We don't come to their toenails, you know what I mean? We don't compare to them in any shape, way, shape, or form. These people, you know what I mean? Okay, so that's the story, right? With that, just wanted to bring that up, that particular issue there. So let's go now to Yud Gimel, right? Bet Yosef Yud Gimel. Can't find Yud Gimel. Where is that? Gotta be somewhere. It could be that there isn't any. Just a Shulchan Aruch. Possible. That's what it looks like. Maybe it's in the beginning. Here it is. Oh, found it. Look, it's in the beginning. Can you imagine? Okay, look what it says, right? It says totally out of order. This is Katva Got by Maniot. It says in the Hagot by Maniot, which is a perush on the Rambam, by the way. And Perek Dal, it says over there, B'Shem Haitur, name of the Itur, one of the Rishonim. Kach Ra'inu she'Gaonim b'chol Rashi Yeshivot. So we saw that all the Gaonim and the Rosh Yeshivas she'en choltzin ad kimei hashamayim al haaretz, the Arvit. So he said they don't take off the Tefillin until they say this prayer in Arvit. So why is that, by the way? Because in those days they were wearing tefillin all day, not like we do, not like today. They wore tefillin all day, so they had to take it off, when it got dark, right? Basically. So this was the point. When they got to this prayer in Arvit, they would take it off. Adkan, that's the end of it. As we said, right? It seems like they were wearing tefillin all day. ולא היו חוצים עד אותה שעה. They weren't taking off until that point. ועכשיו נהגו העולם, so it says now, the custom is, להניח תפילין עליהם עד אחר קדושת ובא לציון. So it says now the custom is, they at least, they wear it until the kedusha ובא לציון, which is after the tachanun. Right? The ladies don't say this, but right, the men say it. The kedusha ובא לציון. ושמעתי שנכון להסירם בשעת שאומר יהי רצון מלפניך שנשמור חוקיך ומצוותיך. And so I heard that it's proper to take them off at that point. But he says this prayer. משום העיד לבני המערבה, like it says in there regarding the people of the West, the Eretz Israel, ברכות בן ד' עמוד ב', שהיו מברכין על חליצת תפילין. But they used to bless על חליצת תפילין. What is that? It's a blessing for taking off the tefillin. אשר קדישנו במצוותיו וציוונו, לשמור חוקיו. They would bless, right, to guard his statues. ואף אגב דספי עלן, שאין לברך על החליצתן, even though we hold that we don't bless when you take off the tefillin. כמו שהתברר בסימן כ"ט, like it says in the סימן כ"ט, בכל מקום, כיוון דבהה מילתא, it says nevertheless, since regarding this matter, לקה bracha, shapir, since regarding this, there's no blessing, shapir dam, it's okay. Let me have to do it like that. Remez de Svarat b'nei Amaraba, alluding to the opinion of the West. So it seems to me then Tam v'reach b'davar says. It says seems to me like there's no justification for this theory here. The because since this whole opinion was pushed out, we don't pass it like it, right? Of the West, right? Maraba lama naseh remez la ve'oseh. Why should we then do some kind of allusion to it? Ve'oseh remez la, and whoever does allusion to it. It seems like he holds that this opinion was not totally pushed aside. Okay, so basically, right, what we're saying there is like this, right? That we don't bless when we took off the tefillin, and we don't bless, right? As we said also in the beginning, we don't bless for groping the tefillin unless it fell out of its place. This is the halacha, right? Even though in Eretz Israel in the old days they used to bless when they took it off. By the way, let me ask you a question, okay? Why would you want to bless for taking off the tefillin? We bless for blessing. We bless for mitzvot, right? What mitzvah is it to take off the tefillin? What mitzvah are you doing?
That's an interesting question.
You're not Yitzchak.
Yeah. What's
There's the mitzvah, if you think about it. You know what the mitzvah is? You're not allowed to wear it at night, so you're doing a mitzvah by taking it off.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. So therefore, you're blessing, right? What? He commanded us to take off the tefillin. When is that? At night. He commanded us to take it off. That's the whole story, right? But we don't pass it like that. Okay, right, whatever.
You're not obligated or you're not allowed?
I'm sorry?
You're not obligated or not allowed to wear tefillin at night?
The truth is that you're not allowed, according to Al-Kha.
Mm-hmm.
According to the Kabbalah, this is a big nunu. It's a big no-no to wear tefillin at night. It's a big prohibition.
I see.
So therefore, right, but, you know, I'll tell you, right, just you should know, let's say a person, you know, it happens, by the way, very often to people that they forget to put on tefillin all day, right? And then they just remembered, like, after sunset, you know? So
Right.
what do you do in a case like that? Do you put it on after sunset?
If you didn't do the mitzvah yet,
Right, you didn't do the mitzvah.
well, if you just said the halachah, you can't.
Right, so the truth is, you know, after sunset, you can still put it on. Why? Because it's still not night. Until Tzitei Kochavim, until stars come out, right? Which is 13 and a half minutes, according to the Geonim. So you do have 13 and a half minutes after sunset to put on the tefillin with a blessing.
Right. But once the stars are out, that's it.
Right. But here's the thing, right? According to Rabbeinu Tam, you have 72 minutes. You know what I mean?
If you follow Rabbeinu Tam, right?
Right. Which, by the way, Maran Paskins like Rabbeinu Tam. So according to Maran Bet Yosef, you have until 72 minutes to put on your tefillin.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But he also says, Maran, in a different place, as we talked about this before, Yitzchak, that once you daven the Arvit, it's night for you already. So says Maran, you don't put on tefillin after that. That's it.
Right.
You understand?
You cut yourself off.
Because
Right.
you made it into night by praying Arvit. But here's the thing, right? That in the Yalkut Yosef, though, you know what he says there? If you didn't put tefillin all day, right, and you said Arvit, and it's still not night, he says you should put it on.
But no blessing.
Right, no blessing, exactly, yeah. Because there's still some chance there that you're doing the mitzvah. After all, it's still daytime, you know?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because Arvit is only derabanan, it's only rabbinical, the whole thing of Arvit. You know? And tefillin is deoraita, so what's more important, you know?
Right.
But on the Shulchan Aruch doesn't hold that way. Shulchan Aruch says, once you pray the Arvit, you can't put on tefillin anymore, that's it. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Let's go on. So he says, now the end, so right. Sefer Torah. So he says, what about the day we have Sefer Torah? The custom is not take off tefillin until they bring back the Sefer Torah to the ark. They put it back into the chest. There's an illusion in the Navi, in the prophet. It says over there, their king passed before them, Rosham, with their head, and Hashem is in their head. But according to Kabbalah, by the way, right, just you should know, you should be wearing your tefillin until Aleinu L'Shabech. You understand?
I heard that.
Yeah, so the truth is, that if you don't have to leave, there's no reason to take it off after Uval Etzion.
If you're not in a rush, basically.
Right, if you're not in Russia, there's no reason to do that. Unless you want to put on Remil Tam. That's something else, right? That's a different story. Okay, so that's that, right? Let's go on. So he says, Ubayom Rosh HaChodesh. So he says, what about Rosh Chodesh? Nagul ha'olam lachalos tefillin kodem tefillat musaf. The custom is to take off the tefillin before musaf. Why is that? Because according to Kabbalah, right, you can't say keter with tefillin, because that's a different keter, two different keter, right? Tefillin is a crown, and Rosh Chodesh is a crown, so you can't have two crowns on at the same time. So therefore, you got to take off the tefillin before musaf of the Rosh Chodesh. Shamati shatam mishum tebeotat tefillah omrim keter, right? Exactly, right? Because of keter. Ve'en nachon layot beotat sha'ah keter tefillin. It's not proper. You should have the crown of tefillin on you at the time. Ken, mashe, like it says, right? Sheikh Tov b'siman lamelav. Like we're going to write in chapter 31. B'shem haZohar, on the name of Zohar. There you go, right? More Zohar. The Midrash Shir Hashirim, and also the Midrash Hashirim. So it says, Al hanachat tefillin, writing putting tefillin, b'chol hamoed, for chol hamoed. B'cheman, the b'tfilah zo omrim keter, and since in this prayer, Musaf, we say keter, afilu keshemitpalel belachash, even if you're praying silently, rawi shelo yulav, they should properly that it shouldn't be you shouldn't have tefillin on, even during the silent one. And he claimed tefillin nashon plila. So look what it says, right? That tefillin is called plila, which is like shehen ot the edut, which is like a sign, testimony, the whole that everybody who sees you, right? That you're man of God, right? Man of the Lord. By putting on your tefillin. That's why it says the Rosh over there. Okay, very good. That's what we're done. So very good. So we just have this little piece here. It says like this, right? When you put tefillin, you got to put the arm one first. Like it says over there in the Gemara Lamed Vav Aleph Menachot. Tana Keshu Maniach Shel Yad Tchila. It says, right, when you put the tefillin, put the hand first, and then the head. But Tama, what's the reason why? Because it says it says first put them on your arm, then it should be between your eyes. But Siman Kavchet, in the chapter Kavchet, it's about Shafiru Pagaba Shel Rosh Tchila, even if he took the head tefillin first by mistake, he touched it, whatever. You should move it aside. Don't put it on. But and you put the arm first. So therefore, even though you're passing by the mitzvah, Nevertheless, in this case, you do have to pass it by. Okay, so we just did the Shulchan Aruch and we're done, right? Shulchan Aruch Yud Gimel. We finished the chapter. Okay, so what does it say over here? It says, Nagu ha'olam shelo lachalot tefillin ad achar kedushat Bal Tzion. So he says the custom is not to take off the tefillin until the kedusha of Bal Tzion. As we said, right now, the truth is we go until the end, like Alein or whatever, something like that. ויש מי שכתב על צד קבלה שלא לחלות צד שגמר מהם 3 קדושות ו4 קדוש קדישים. So the Rama brings this, right? According to Kabbalah, it says you really shouldn't take off the tefillin until you do 3 kedushot and 4 kadishim. Right? By the way, their Kabbalah is not the Kabbalah of the Arizal. So the Arizal says until Aleinu, right? That's what he says. That's our Kabbalah, right? Depending on whose Kabbalah it is. Da'inu le'achar Kaddish Yatom. That's after the Kaddish Yatom. Then it was the mourner's Kaddish, right? Which is the last one that we do. Ad Israel, right? So that's how they do the people who are very religious, right? Very devout, whatever. So then says Maran Shulchan Aruch, if there's a Sefer Torah that day, we take it off, and we don't take it off until you bring back the Sefer Torah to the ark. It says the Rama here, that's the place where you put the Sefer Torah there. You place it, the chest. But it says in these countries, in other words, the Ashkenazim, that they take back the Torah, they take it back right after they read the Torah. You should only do it like the rest of the days, according to that custom. So it says on Rosh Chodesh, what do you do? Take them up before Musaf. So says the Rama, it's also same thing in Chol HaMoed, right? Even though we don't put tefillin on Chol HaMoed, right? The Sfaradim, we don't put. Also, many of the Ashkenazim don't put it either. In Eretz Israel, the Ashkenazim don't put it either. That's only when they say Musaf. When they say Keter. So he says, but they do have a custom to take them off. Call them Musaf bechol makom, before the Musaf in any case. So basically, right, the story is that we Sfaradim don't put tefillin on Chol HaMoed at all. In Eretz Israel, nobody puts it on. Right? But here in diaspora, some Ashkenazim, the Lithuanians, they put on tefillin on Chol HaMoed. This is also machloket in the Talmud, this whole thing, right? But the Zohar Paskins, that what? You shouldn't put tefillin on Chol HaMoed. It considers that to be a big problem, the Zohar, a big issue. So therefore, right, try to avoid that, as we said, right, for the Sfaradim at least. So, okay, good. So then, that's the story. Okay, we're finished with the chapter. Very good. Okay, Baruch Hashem, very nice. I'm glad we got some work done today. Baruch Hashem, beautiful.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So Shabbat Shalom. God bless all of you. Chazak u'Baruch. Be blessed. Be holy. Be healthy. Be happy, and be wealthy.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
All the best. God bless. Oh, my God.